The 2000s were a golden era for science fiction. Bold visions, dangerous ideas, and stories that dared to question everything. But some films went so far, they almost never reached the screen. From violent dystopias to politically charged allegories, these are the 15 must-see 2000 sci-fi movies that censors tried to silence, but audiences refused to forget. First, Battle Royale, 2000. In a near-future Japan, unruly students are forced into a televised death match until only one survives. Battle Royale opens with a trembling girl, blood-splattered and smiling, an image so disturbing it burned itself into pop culture. Directed by Kinji Fukasaku, the film wasn't just shocking for its violence, it was a razor-sharp critique of authoritarian control, youth alienation, and the voyeuristic hunger of mass entertainment. Its release sent shockwaves. Japan hesitated to fully promote it domestically, wary of public backlash. In the West, U.S. distributors avoided it for years, fearing the MPAA's reaction to teenagers killing each other, especially after real-world school tragedies. Germany outright banned it, calling it dangerous and corrupting. Australia slapped it with the harshest ratings, limiting who could even rent it. Despite this, Battle Royale spread underground. Pirated DVDs and word-of-mouth screenings made it a cult legend. Quentin Tarantino called it one of his favorite films, and its DNA can be seen in The Hunger Games, though Suzanne Collins insists she never saw it. In the end, the bans only fueled curiosity, turning Battle Royale into a defiant anthem against censorship itself. 2. The Matrix Reloaded, 2003. By 2003, The Matrix had already changed cinema forever. But The Matrix Reloaded wasn't content with bullet time and philosophy. It doubled down on relentless action, religious allegory, and existential dread. The freeway chase, with real cars flipping and crashing, remains one of cinema's great action ballets. Yet, in certain countries, the sequel was accused of going too far. Its heavy Christian and Gnostic undertones, Neo as a messiah, Zion as the last human city, unsettled religious boards. Some regions saw the level of stylized violence as an unacceptable escalation from the first film. While not widely banned outright, several nations delayed or restricted screenings, requiring cuts to the most intense fight sequences. In the Middle East and parts of Southeast Asia, concerns about the film's spiritual symbolism meant it played in heavily edited form. Ironically, these edits stripped away key thematic layers, leaving audiences confused. The controversy didn't hurt box office numbers. Reloaded became one of the decade's biggest sci-fi hits. But it cemented the Matrix franchise's reputation for pushing philosophical and political buttons as much as visual ones. 3. Bruce Almighty, 2003. A comedy too dangerous for the divine. On the surface, Bruce Almighty is a light-hearted Jim Carrey comedy. But behind the laughs, Carrey gaining God's powers for a week, lay a premise some countries found blasphemous. Depicting God as a regular man was unacceptable to several Islamic nations, where religious law forbids human portrayals of the divine. The film was banned outright in Egypt, Malaysia, and parts of the Middle East. Officials claimed it risked mocking religious sanctity and misleading the faithful. Interestingly, Morgan Freeman's calm, dignified portrayal of God won critical praise in the West, where many saw it as warm and inclusive. This wasn't just a case of cultural misunderstanding. It highlighted the global divide in what's considered sacred versus satirical. The ban sparked debates on freedom of expression, and in some regions, DVD imports became a form of quiet rebellion. For audiences who could watch it freely, Bruce Almighty became a gentle reminder that sometimes laughter is the most subversive act of all. 4. The Da Vinci Code, 2006. When Ron Howard adapted Dan Brown's best-selling novel, he knew controversy would follow, but few expected the firestorm that erupted. The Da Vinci Code suggested, through its intricate mystery, that Jesus may have had descendants and that the Catholic Church had spent centuries covering it up. The opening, a haunting murder inside the Louvre, set the tone. Art, religion, and history colliding in a dangerous conspiracy. Tom Hanks, as symbologist Robert Langdon, was the audience's guide through hidden codes and forbidden truths, while Audrey Tautou played the mysterious cryptologist with ties to The Secret. The Vatican denounced the film before it even premiered. Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, and Pakistan banned it outright. Jordan and Sri Lanka joined them. In the Philippines and India, intense public protests forced theaters to cancel showings. Religious authorities claimed it was offensive to faith, historically false, and a direct attack on Christianity. Despite the bans, The Da Vinci Code became one of the decade's highest-grossing films, its success amplified by the very controversy meant to silence it. In some countries, black-market DVDs were passed around like sacred contraband, proving that banning a story often only makes people more determined to hear it. 5. Borat, 2006. Sacha Baron Cohen's mockumentary was marketed as absurd comedy, but Borat, Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit, Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan, was a weapon disguised as farce. Cohen's bumbling Kazakh journalist wandered through the U.S., exposing prejudice, ignorance, and hypocrisy. Not just in America, but everywhere it played. The humor was crude, the setups were outrageous, and many governments wanted nothing to do with it. Most of the Arab League, including the United Arab Emirates and Qatar, banned it outright for cultural insult. Russia temporarily pulled it from cinemas, while Kazakhstan's own officials initially denounced it as slander. The film's greatest offense? It didn't just mock, it revealed. Unsuspecting real people reacted in ways that revealed deep biases, and Cohen left those moments unfiltered. That unflinching lens made Borat more than comedy. It was a social mirror, and for some, that was intolerable. Ironically, Kazakhstan later embraced the attention, using Borat quotes in tourism campaigns. A film once seen as a threat ended up changing an entire nation's image, for better or worse. 6. The Departed, 2006. Martin Scorsese's The Departed was a masterclass in tension, a cat-and-mouse game between an undercover cop inside the mob and a mole inside the police. Set in Boston, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Matt Damon, and Jack Nicholson, it won Scorsese his long-overdue Oscar for Best Director. But in mainland China, audiences never saw it in theaters. The ban wasn't about violence, swearing, or crime. It was political. One line, a passing reference to Chinese government plans to invade Taiwan, was enough to stop the film cold. In China, such implications are considered highly sensitive, and censors refuse to risk airing them to a domestic audience. The irony? The line in question is fleeting, easily missed by Western viewers. Yet, it demonstrated how a single sentence could doom an entire film in certain markets. Pirated copies flooded in anyway, because Scorsese's name alone was enough to draw cinephiles. In the end, The Departed proved that censorship can hinge on the smallest detail, and that storytellers often pay the price for truths their characters speak. 7th District 9, 2009. When Neil Blomkamp's District 9 landed in theaters, it wasn't the usual alien invasion spectacle. Instead, it was a raw, documentary-style sci-fi set in Johannesburg, where extraterrestrial refugees, called prawns, were herded into slums and treated like second-class citizens. It was a powerful allegory for apartheid, racism, and systemic oppression. The story followed Wikus van de Merwe, a bureaucrat tasked with evicting the aliens, who becomes infected with their DNA. His slow transformation into the very thing he once despised mirrored South Africa's own painful history of segregation and fear. The film's gritty realism, handheld camera work, and unflinching portrayal of poverty shocked audiences expecting a glossy blockbuster. But in Nigeria, the reaction was outrage. Officials claimed the film depicted Nigerians as criminals, prostitutes, and cannibals, a national humiliation on the big screen. The government demanded Sony Pictures issue an apology and immediately pulled the film from all theaters. The ban only amplified curiosity. Bootleg copies spread through African cities, and debate erupted over whether District 9 was a political warning or a racial insult. In truth, it was both. A mirror showing humanity's ugliest tendencies, wrapped in the skin of a sci-fi thriller. Today, It's hailed as one of the decade's most daring works, proof that sometimes the most dangerous stories are the ones closest to home. 8. Persepolis, 2007. Based on Marjane Satrapi's autobiographical graphic novel, Persepolis told the story of a young girl growing up during the Iranian Revolution and the heavy shadow of fundamentalism that followed. The animation was stark black and white, a visual style that made its emotional beats even more striking. The film dared to show a side of Iran rarely depicted in cinema: the loss of personal freedoms, the strict morality laws, and the suffocating power of religious authority. Through Satrapi's eyes, we saw childhood innocence collide with political brutality. In Iran, the film was banned outright. Authorities condemned it as anti-Islamic propaganda, claiming it distorted the country's history. But Persepolis didn't just anger officials in Tehran. It stirred protests even in France, where religious groups accused it of disrespecting faith. Despite this, it won the jury prize at Cannes and an Oscar nomination for Best Animated Feature. The very countries that tried to erase it inadvertently helped it gain global recognition. For many viewers, especially women in the Middle East, Persepolis was more than a movie. It was a voice they weren't allowed to have. That's what made it dangerous and unforgettable. 9. Zoolander, 2001. At first glance, Zoolander is harmless fun, a ridiculous satire about male models, fashion world excess, and absurd vanity. Ben Stiller's dim-witted Derek Zoolander and Owen Wilson's free-spirited Hansel compete in the shallowest of arenas, until they uncover a conspiracy to assassinate a world leader. The problem? That leader was the Prime Minister of Malaysia. The film's plot, involving a fictional plan to kill him, triggered an immediate ban in Malaysia. Officials accused the movie of mocking their nation and leadership. Neighboring Singapore also prohibited its release, citing sensitive political content. In the West, it was seen as absurd comedy, but in Southeast Asia, it was a matter of national pride. The ban lasted for years, only lifting when the film had already become a cult classic. By then, Zoolander had spawned endless memes, catchphrases, blue steel, and even a sequel. Its banning is a reminder that comedy isn't universal. What one culture sees as satire, another may see as insult, and in the age of global cinema, a joke in Hollywood can have diplomatic consequences halfway around the world. 10. Lara Croft, Tomb Raider, The Cradle of Life, 2003. Angelina Jolie's return as the iconic Lara Croft took the adventurer into dangerous new territory, both on-screen and geopolitically. The Cradle of Life followed Lara as she hunted for Pandora's box, a mythical relic said to unleash a deadly plague. The film's globe-trotting chase took her from Greek ruins to the mountains of China, and that's where the trouble began. One key sequence depicted Chinese gangsters and corrupt officials aiding the villain, a portrayal Beijing found unacceptable. The State Administration of Radio, Film, and Television declared the movie disrespectful to Chinese culture and barred it from release in mainland cinemas. This wasn't just about image. China's film industry was opening to foreign markets, but with strict control over how the nation was portrayed. The ban meant The Cradle of Life lost access to one of the fastest-growing box office markets in the world. Yet, for Western audiences, the controversy added mystique. Jolie herself brushed off the political drama, focusing instead on her physically punishing stunts, from underwater combat to cliff dives, performed with minimal CGI. Today, the ban feels almost quaint compared to modern cinematic diplomacy battles. But in 2003, it was a stark reminder that in the world of blockbuster filmmaking, geography isn't just a setting. It's a political minefield. 11. The Simpsons Movie, 2007. For decades, The Simpsons thrived on poking fun at everyone: politicians, celebrities, corporations, and entire countries. When the series finally hit the big screen, fans expected more of the same. What they got was sharper, bolder, and, for some governments, far too irreverent. The plot, involving Springfield being quarantined under a giant dome, was filled with jokes about pollution, corporate greed, and government incompetence. But the real problem for certain countries was the show's irreverent use of religious imagery and political caricature. Myanmar and parts of Venezuela banned the film, citing inappropriate content and political provocation. The movie's bright yellow animation even triggered bizarre local regulations in some regions, where restrictions on certain color combinations for media existed due to political symbolism. While that may sound absurd, it underscored the unpredictable nature of censorship. What seems harmless in one culture can carry loaded meaning in another. Still, The Simpsons movie grossed over $500 million worldwide, proving that no dome, literal or metaphorical, could contain Springfield's chaos. And in banned territories, fans simply downloaded it, laughing a little harder at the fact they weren't supposed to. 12. The Kingdom, 2007. Peter Berg's. The Kingdom was a tense action thriller inspired by real-life terrorist attacks in Saudi Arabia. Following an FBI team investigating a bombing in Riyadh, the film combined procedural investigation with intense firefights, creating a gripping mix of politics and action. But in the Middle East, it was radioactive. Saudi Arabia banned the film entirely, objecting to its depiction of the kingdom as a hotbed of extremist violence and corruption. Neighboring Bahrain and Kuwait followed suit. Officials claimed it painted an unfair picture of the Arab world and exploited tragedy for entertainment. The irony was that the kingdom portrayed many Saudi characters as heroic and cooperative with the Americans, but nuance rarely survives the blunt edge of censorship. Even in the United States, the film stirred debate over its portrayal of the War on Terror, and whether Hollywood was exploiting real tragedies too soon after they occurred. Despite the bans, The Kingdom developed a strong following on DVD and streaming, particularly among audiences curious about its portrayal of U.S.-Middle East relations. In hindsight, its explosive finale and moral ambiguity make it one of the more daring political thrillers of the 2000s, a film that proves sometimes truth and fiction are equally dangerous. 13. Brokeback Mountain, 2005. While often remembered as a romantic drama, Brokeback Mountain also exists within the realm of speculative human storytelling, a kind of social science fiction that imagines lives in defiance of rigid norms. Set against the sweeping Wyoming landscape, the story followed Ennis Del Mar and Jack Twist, two ranch hands whose relationship quietly unraveled the boundaries of masculinity in cinema. For some, this was revolutionary art. For others, it was intolerable. China, several Middle Eastern countries, and much of the Caribbean banned the film outright. Official reasons ranged from moral offense to cultural incompatibility, but the underlying fear was clear. Brokeback Mountain humanized a love that governments preferred to erase. The bans didn't just block screenings, they denied entire populations access to a cultural landmark. Yet the film still found its way in, via pirated DVDs and digital downloads. In places where it was banned, underground screenings became acts of defiance, often in secret living rooms or private cafes. Its critical success, 3 Oscars, including Best Director for Ang Lee, proved that a story grounded in human vulnerability could have as much cultural impact as any high-tech sci-fi epic. And in the places that banned it, the absence of Brokeback Mountain became its own form of presence, a whispered, forbidden legend. 14. The Circle, 2000. Though less known internationally, The Circle deserves its place among 2000s sci-fi adjacent works that faced bans. Directed by Jafar Panahi, the film follows several Iranian women navigating a labyrinth of restrictive laws and social barriers. While not set in a futuristic world, its oppressive society feels like speculative fiction made horrifyingly real. Panahi used long takes and interconnected stories to show how quickly freedom could vanish for women under Iran's morality codes. The circle of the title was both literal and metaphorical, a trap that no one could escape. Iran's government banned the film immediately, calling it a misrepresentation of Islamic values. It was never shown publicly within the country, and Panahi faced years of harassment, arrests, and eventually a formal ban on filmmaking. Yet The Circle won the Golden Lion at the Venice Film Festival, and international critics hailed it as a masterpiece of quiet resistance. Much like Orwell's 1984, it didn't need spaceships or robots to feel like sci-fi. The dystopia was already here. That truth was precisely why it was banned. 15. Death Note, 2008. Based on the Japanese manga, Death Note blurred the line between supernatural fantasy and moral philosophy. It followed a high school student who discovers a notebook with deadly power. Write a name in it, and that person dies. The live-action film adaptation was stylish, eerie, and deeply unsettling, and for some authorities, far too influential. In China, reports emerged of students creating their own death notes and filling them with the names of classmates and teachers. The phenomenon sparked moral panic. Schools cracked down, media outlets ran alarmist headlines, and the government moved quickly to ban not just the film, but the entire Death Note franchise. Critics of the ban argued that the story's core was a cautionary tale about corruption, the dangers of unchecked power, and the cost of playing God. But in the eyes of censors, the potential for copycat behavior outweighed artistic merit. Ironically, the ban transformed Death Note into a status symbol among young fans. Pirated copies circulated on USB drives, and online communities analyzed the moral dilemmas at its heart. For a generation that grew up under strict media control, owning Death Note became its own quiet rebellion. Censorship can silence a film's release, but rarely its voice. These 15 sci-fi works of the 2000s proved that ideas travel faster than bans, inspiring debate, defiance, and discovery. If these stories survived the cutting room of history, imagine what other forbidden tales are still waiting to be found.